So you have joined us here today to talk about the business of art, strategies for long-term success. What you probably have realized is that we're not Ella Macintyre. Ella's unfortunately unable to present today, but so when Ella can't present, two white guys have to it's like that's the ratio of...
It doesn't make a whole Ella.
No, we're probably only halfway there. So we'll cover off very quickly who we are, since we're not Ella. So I'm Philip. I'm the co-founder, not the co-founder, I am the founder of Mighty Kingdom, and I've been working in this industry for about 13 years now. I'm reading my own bio from the screen there, but I worked at Ratbag, Chrome, and now at Mighty Kingdom. And yeah, so I've sort of been in the industry from console and seen it sort of transition through to mobile. So seen a lot of things, and I'll let Kim introduce himself.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Kim, or Kimbo, as I prefer if you don't know me. They look strikingly similar, actually, Phil. So
It's almost like you copy and pasted my...
Yeah. I should have probably put more time into this, but yeah. So I've been working in games for 18 years. Made anything from like PC games, console, to mobile games. Worked in a lot of the same places that Phil has. I worked for 6 Foot Kid as well for a while, which was sort of a part of Half Brick. And yeah, I've made racing games,
Star Wars games.
Third-person action games, Star Wars. Seen it, a quiz game. I've made a bunch of different types of games, mobile management games, lots of games. So yeah, but I've still got so much to learn. That's the magic bit.
And so when Kim and I stepped up to take this over, we asked Ella what the sort of core message she wanted to get across was, and this is sort of what she told us. You have to be as good at making a business as you are at making games. Like quite often we focus a lot on the product. We can get sucked into that trap of thinking that it's all about the game, and you put all your energy there and you forget to do all the other things around it that'll ensure that your company will sort of grow and succeed. Oh my God, there's too many keyboards here. So, go away. This is not going to happen. So, game development is risky, right? Like, if it was easy, then everyone would do it and would all be successful. But there's a lot of risk in this, and so we need to look at ways, that we can manage it. Games are like expensive. They take a long time to make. They're expensive to market. Increasingly now, we're getting more and more content in the space, and it's harder and harder to sort of stand out. And so, at Mighty Kingdom, the way we've sort of survived and grown is we look for ways that we can sort of reduce that risk in many ways as possible. And so I guess some assumptions that we'll make as we sort of go through this talk is that you guys want to make more than one game. There's some companies out there that come together for a game and then they move on, and that's fine. But this is sort of based around sustainability and long-term growth. And we're also sort of assuming here that you earn your revenue from your users. And that means we've done a lot of fee-for-service work in the past where people pay you to make a game, and that you can certainly grow a company like that. But if you want to achieve the scale that, where we want to go, we look at deriving revenue from an audience through in-app purchasing, ads and stuff like that. So, here we go. We'll be...
Can I say one thing? One of the things that I think has been good for Mighty Kingdom as well is that we've tried to get the company into a position where Phil can sort of get himself out above the weeds and spend more time on that business strategy stuff and thinking about how we can manage risk better and stuff like that. So we've just hired Tony Lawrence, who's going to help us do that as well.
I saw him in the crowd.
Is he here?
There he is.
Hey.
Woo!
So yeah, I think that's a really important thing that's happened to Mighty Kingdom. It's freed up Phil, hopefully, to do less of that day-to-day solving my problems and more just thinking about how we're going to do all this sort of stuff as well and helping us push in that direction.
So we're going to sort of talk about it in sort of 3 different levels. We'll talk about it. I'll talk first about the strategic level, what you can do at a sort of a company level when looking at risk and how you manage it. And then Kim will step in and talk a bit about managing risk at the product level and how you can, the development process. And then I'll talk quickly at the end a little bit about how that changes at scale. So, how does the strategy of your business affect the risk? The first thing that I'll say is that it's very easy to get sucked into the feature set, and you can be far too innovative in your product. If you're trying to be on that bleeding edge, that cutting edge, there's a high cost to maintain that advantage. But also, if you're too far ahead of the market, It can be, it's sort of like, someone would describe it to me as like, if there's too many new things, it's like your brain is so overloaded with new experiences, it can't focus, there's nothing to anchor it. So there is such a thing as being too innovative. But also, if you aren't innovative enough, you end up being lost in that sort of the noise, the sea of those thousands of games that are released every day. You know, you can look at targeting a niche, which is, as the internet has sort of shown, niches can be really big and very lucrative. But all that really does is it shifts a lot of that focus onto your marketing. So the risks aren't it's not like you're getting rid of the risk, you're just moving it, you're just displacing it somewhere else. But if you go too broad, again, it's difficult to stand out. So it's all about finding those balances. And if you, well, one of the things we did early on in Mighty Kingdom is we do a lot of like fee-for-service work, and a lot of times when you're growing your company, there's a lot of pressure on cash flow. And so opportunities will come up, and sometimes it feels very tempting to chase those opportunities. But in doing so, it might take you away from the core focus of your studio and minimize the ability for you to reuse code and assets across your products. And, you know, one thing that I often found as well is people try to de-risk their products by just going slowly, so they're not over-investing. But all this really does is takes the pressure off cash flow and puts it elsewhere. So it puts it onto your time, basically. In my previous talk, you might have heard me say that the most limited resource we have as game developers isn't money or people, because you can get more of those. It's time. And so you want to, in my experience, you should minimize your time to failure. You should be trying things very, very quickly, get to that point where you know where it's working or not, and then moving on. And so long and slow might feel like you're not overcommitting, but all you're doing is you're just jeopardizing your opportunity to do something else if it doesn't work. Right, so at a strategic level at Mighty Kingdom, how do we sort of manage all these things? The first one for us is to be customer focused. This means that all of our systems and processes, everything should be engineered around an outcome for a customer. And like, as you're transitioning from that paid to sort of licensing or original IP, there can be different customers. There's the clients that you work with, but also the audience who plays your games. But Ella's got some notes here. Yeah, one of the things she pointed out is it's tempting to think of your audience as being your peers or awards judges, or even yourself. Like, you know, make a game for yourself is one of the things that I hear a lot. But really, your audience isn't any of those people, because they're not the ones who are going to be funding the future of your studio, unless you're independently wealthy, which I guess is fine. So you need to be making games with your customers in mind. And so for us, I try and remove things that I find that are getting in the way of the customer, and making sure that the people who are making the games, who are close to the customer, are empowered to make the decisions that will drive the games forward. So the next thing we need to do at a strategic level is understand the market that you operate in. Like, your company isn't the only company out there. You don't live in a vacuum. So you want to look at what other people have done, what they are doing, and sort of see where the market is going. And sort of understand, oftentimes you can get sucked in by seeing that there's a product that doesn't exist, and so you think you've found the secret sauce to go away and become successful. But it might not exist for a reason. So it's just understanding, has someone tried this and failed? Are you just heading down the same path again? Or have you actually seen, or you're actually sort of following a trend and getting ahead of the market? What has Ella written here? Nope, that's pretty much what you wrote.
Nailed it.
Yeah, you know, one of the points she makes is, like, if you're looking around and you can't find an example of what you're trying to do elsewhere, or at least, like, it might not necessarily be exactly what you're trying to do, but it's like on the path to where you want to go. If you can't see it somewhere, all you're doing is bringing risk into your organization, because you're the one who's now forging a brand new path. So one of the things we talk about is being market plus one, which is sort of like, you look at what the market's doing, understand that it's going to take you like 9 months to a year to develop your game, project forward what the market will look like then, and then add a feature to it, and sort of move forward in incremental steps. Oh, actually, I just stole your slide. That's from later. That's fine.
There's going to be a lot of reiteration in my slides.
So the other thing,
exactly this stuff.
I just realized I didn't lay that slide out the next one. It's going to be fun. The other thing we do is we look at the data. I know being data-driven or that sort of thing can get a sort of a bad reputation, but it's very important, because what we find is that when you talk to your customers directly, they often lie about, not intentionally, but they don't tell you the full truth about what they're thinking or why they do what they do. But the data doesn't lie. The data is like a good historical record of what has happened. So use the data in your decision making as you're building your products, as you're building your company and assessing which markets you want to play in or which genres you want to enter. But it is historical, it is backwards facing, so just understand that about it. It's not going to tell you where the market's going. It's really good at telling you where it's been, and you can make some guesses. But you are going to have to do the work and the research and like take a bit of a step forward. But if you've got the data to back you up to this point, then your risk is a lot smaller if you're just on top of that rather than sort of making it all up from the ground up.
That font is so small.
Which one? Oh yeah, the notes, they're tiny. These are some of the tools that we use to help us get that data. You see there's a gap at the bottom right where I was supposed to put another one, but I forgot. So, so Sensor Tower and App Annie are really great tools for showing you sort of like what a game's doing, how it's performing. And they've also got comparative tools so you can see how other games are doing in the same genre. What I like to do when looking at product decisions and strategic decisions is look at like a high, mid, low sort of scenario. Like, what are the top 5% of the games doing? What are the top 50%? What are the, just sort of getting an idea where those lines are. And then you can sort of assess the risk that you're taking by your likelihood of those outcomes. If there's only one company that's doing all the money, it's going to be really hard for you to replicate that. But if there's a few players and you can see that there's enough space in that market for you to play as well, then that's a less risky proposition. And Playtest Cloud is another great tool. If you're not familiar with it, what you do is you upload a version of your game, you tell them who the target audience is, they find players to play your game and they record them doing it. That's the fun part. And they fill out a survey afterwards, and it's a great way
It's an eye-opener.
of having your ego shattered and torn to pieces and scattered on the floor.
It's fairly reasonably priced as well. It's not too bad.
Yeah, there's similar tools out there as well. I saw one recently that did biometric scanning as well, so you can get heart rates through the game, which is pretty cool. That's pretty fun. But these tools I find are invaluable for just head checking yourself as you're developing your products and making sure that you're not making a strategic error. Yeah, this is a stolen slide from my previous talk. One of the things I think another way to protect yourself on a strategic level is actually have a vision of what you want to be, because that helps you define what opportunities you will chase, what ones you'll pass on, and it means that you can have a clarity of focus and purpose around all the actions that you take. At Mighty Kingdom, our goal is to be bigger than Disney. Yeah, and so for us, it's such a secret that I say it in every single talk. But no, so that's a pretty lofty goal, and through that lens, we think of ourselves as an entertainment company. So we focus a lot on investing in the things that'll help us build those brands and build those stories and those characters and those worlds that people are going to want to play in and people are going to want to interact with, whether it's a game, a movie, or whatever. But we're at the very start of that journey, but that helps us. Whenever we're looking at any opportunity in front of us, we can view it through that lens and we can see, does this help us get us closer? And does that mitigate risk in terms of the strategy, or does this take us away from our vision, which increases risk? There we go. Ella writes a lot, so it's hard to kind of pass it all very, very quickly. There we go. And one of the things that I started Mighty Kingdom with another person who has, I was going to say he's no longer with us, but no, he's still here, but he's still alive, but he's just in a different company. But one of the things that he said to me early on was, obviously putting this company together, I'm not worried if we succeed, that's great, we all want to succeed. And I don't ultimately care if we fail, because failure means that we just know what not to do next time, and we can just pick ourselves up and go again. But he says what he fears is mediocrity. He doesn't want to wake up in 5 years' time with the same problems and the same struggles, doing the same things. He wants to keep making sure that we're pushing forward on our journey. And so for me, you need to be constantly reevaluating your business strategy to make sure that it is moving forward and that you are experiencing new and interesting problems and not just the same problems again and again and again. And if you are stuck in that loop, maybe it's time to take on some more risk and push yourself a bit further. Yeah. So yeah, that's me from strategy. I'm going to hand you over to Kimbo.
So as you can see, we pulled this together at reasonably short notice. And one thing I'm really happy about, oh my God.
That's a really expensive laptop.
It's fine.
That's fine.
It's fine. One of the things I'm really happy about is that Ella's not here. Because this is kind of her model, and we've all adopted it at Mighty Kingdom. It's Mighty Kingdom's model, but she certainly drives this. And I'm going to make some mistakes in this talk, and I'm glad she's not going to see them, because she'd be pissed.
I'd like you all to point them out as they come up.
All right. Okay. So this is sort of I'll talk about managing product risk through development, and then I'll talk about original IP and license versus to manage your risk as well. And just before I start as well, this is not foolproof, right? This process doesn't work doesn't work instantly all the time. We'd already be sitting here, we'd be presenting this in Bentleys if it was. I'd be in a Bentley over there. Phil would be in a Tesla up here.
Wearing a crown.
But I think last year, over the last year, we've really refined this process to be really strong for us and really useful. So here we go. And what it really gives us is an understanding of how we can test our hypotheses. Like, we have thoughts on design, we have that creative vision, and we start there. But we sort of have this system that allows us to test whether or not we should do it or not. Does that change the slide?
You just change your notes.
Oh, damn it. How do I change the slide, Phil?
You just go forward, you did it,
That's what I did. Oh,
Technology.
You do it twice. Okay. All right. So step one is to understand the audience. And we spend a lot of time on this. So we do a lot of research, whether or not that's, it totally depends on the product, but we do that through discussion with a license partner is a great place to start there, right? So if you have a license partner and they know their brand and their product, then they're going to be able to help you discover what that audience wants and what that audience loves. We do research, like Phil said, through the App Store. We find the demographic that we think we're trying to hit, and then we study that and figure out what those people are playing. We look at Facebook, look at that demographic on Facebook, see what they're interested in. And then we use things like, there's a few resources we use, like Mobile Free-to-Play, Deconstructor of Fun, the Puzzle Report, and there's a bunch of other free-to-play resources that are really useful, that break down different games and allow you to understand who your players are and what sort of persona they have. That's a phrase we use a lot now when we're in this early stage, is like, who is our player persona? And what do they want to do? You know, are they a collector? Do they like competitive PvP sort of stuff? And if you get that wrong, that can really have a big effect on what you're doing. I clearly have no idea what I'm doing here. Hang on, wait, I got it now. So, and what we're doing at that point is we're trying to find that feature set, right, that fits the audience and fits the brand. So, and what the potential fans of that are going to expect from that game, and we try to bring that together. So we look at like what second-to-second mechanics are going to work, whether it's like a match 3, what sort of power-ups or a clicker or whatever, and then we look at what sort of meta game is going to wrap around that well and fit with that audience. And then those additional features I spoke about, like, are people going to want those competitive leagues? Are people going to want just endless collecting, you know, like got to catch them all type vibe? So, man.
First time using a...
First time using anything.
Here we go.
Yeah, right. But what about that last notes?
Let's go back.
Hang on.
And then you want to go forward, and then this way.
But where was I before? Yeah, okay.
This is good.
But we're past understanding the audience, I think.
Okay, and then move on.
No, we're not. So you could...
Well rehearsed.
I miss Ella now. Just full disclosure.
I think they will do too.
So, thanks, Phil. So, like Phil said before, you could try to innovate completely, right? Like, you can go all in and just create a whole new mechanic, but that's going to heap risk onto development. So we look to deliver a product that sort of we know our audience already enjoys through that system that we use, and then we try to +1 or +2 it, which is another phrase that we use a lot around the studio now. like a twist on some of those things I talked about, twist on a competitive, cooperative thing, new social stuff, or just presenting some of the features that already exist in one of these games in a different way that fits the brand. Or one of the other things that we've sort of seen happening and what we're going to try and lean into is figuring out if there's a segment in a game that loves a certain part of that game, and then like doubling down on that in a game where that is the core of the game. So I think we have seen that with leagues in a lot of the match 3 stuff going around. Leagues are what players love and what keeps them in your game and what keeps them coming back. All right. Yeah. So data trumps opinion always, and I guess there's a spectrum here of like developers that are more about opinion and this is what I feel, yeah, and more about the data. But again, like you want to start with the opinion and start with the ideas, and then you want to check it against the data. So we check in Phil's slide that he stole from me. We check App Annie, we check Sensor Tower. And luckily enough for us, we've managed to build a really strong network, like right around the world, of other developers that are willing to share info with us. And there's a few here. Andy's here today, who is a friend of ours who sometimes helps with that. Now I've dogged him into everyone to do that. Sorry, Andy. But yeah, we ask them what if their game sits in the same wheelhouse as ours. Like, how do your games perform? Like, what should we be looking for? Where are those benchmarks? And we use these games to look at all of the games and how they align with what we're doing. Every game that aligns with what we're doing in terms of audience and mechanic, we're trying to match that up. And then what we do is, before we even start, is we model everything pretty much that we can. So we look at financials, KPIs, and we just try and model out how a game might look from a worst case scenario, installs, everything, to a best case scenario. I mean, we don't tend to worry about like going full supercell, because that will happen if it happens, but we try to sort of get a good idea of what that space is going to look like. We try to include every part of the business around the game, including like cost per install, best and worst case retention from day 1 to day 30, generally we start there, and then forecast that out a bit further. And then we look at forecasted spending as well. And then we get to a place, hopefully, where it's no longer like, I think this would be a cool game, or, you know, I like this sort of game, other people will probably play it, to a place where we're like, we understand everything that we possibly could about this product before we start it, and what it would look like as a business if we made it. So it just pulls that risk out, right, if we use that process. Because we feel like we've done everything we can to understand where we might end up. And then we try to release early and release often. And I mean, this is probably the hardest bit, yeah. I reckon, because with Kitty Keeper, definitely I would have preferred to release earlier, but you also don't want to release something that's not ready. So we try to get it into the hands of people. We play test, cloud build. We do internal testing. We share with people in the industry that we respect their opinion, and we give them builds to see what sort of feedback we get from them. And then once we've sort of got something to a point where we think it's ready to go, we launch it. And one thing we've learned is to have a marketing budget when you're soft launching, because, which is again a really hard thing to do, because it's hard to tell yourself to spend less on development and more on marketing, because you want the game to be good, but you've just got to do it. Otherwise, you'll end up with users that are probably not the users that you are targeting. So you want to try and, if you spend on a user and you're advertising to a really specific persona that you plan to advertise to, and you plan to make this game for, then you're going to get higher quality data and hopefully your forecasting and that data will match up. So I'll just, do you want to jump in?
Just to add to that as well, like if you're using, because we use data a lot to inform a lot of our decisions, you need to make sure that that data is statistically relevant. You need to have enough people in there. If you're trying to infer too much from like 200 players, you're just throwing noodles at the wall, basically. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I said noodles. And if you can get into the thousands and tens of thousands, then you start to get statistically relevant data. Otherwise, yeah, that's what we're after. Bye.
Yeah, you do want those big numbers. Thank you, Phil. Yeah, and you know, we all love store features, right? We're all very grateful to Apple and Google for helping us in that way, but you'll get wildly varying users from that. So you still want those. Obviously, they're a great bonus, but it shouldn't be the core of your marketing plan for the soft launch. So, what we try to do in that early stage is to release a highly polished game with about 10 days of content. And this is sort of a newer thing that we're doing, but just to test that first 7 days and see how people that you thought were going to respond to it are responding to it. So we start with that first 7 days, and then you can go out from there after soft launch in terms of jumping on that content treadmill. So that allows you to test core loop, retention, all that stuff. And one of the things like MVP, we used to say MVP a lot. One of the things we've learned is you want that first experience to be not the minimum thing you think you can release. I think that's probably a bit of a trap you can fall into. Like, it needs to be the beautiful thing that you want to show to everyone. All right, a lot of notes. So I talked about organic users being wildly varied. You want to try and not avoid organic users, but you want to have a way to track who your high value users are. So ideally having something like, I mean, you want Unity Analytics, obviously, game analytics, but you want AppsFlyer or something like that in there to attribute where those users are coming from. So that every user you pay for, you can see what they do, how long they retain, what they spend, and you can track that all the way through. And then you can get a good understanding of, like, we thought our CPI our cost per install would be this, and we thought this user would behave this way, and then you can just see what it does. And there's no mistaking what's going on there.
And attribution is also really good at discovering those like hidden users that are like keying into a very particular part of your game, like Kim was talking about before. And that can be an opportunity for you to create a new product around that cohort of users as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's all about understanding where your players are coming from, right? What does the performance of a user coming from Facebook ads look like compared to a user coming from a rewarded video ad compared to organic? All right. Incrementalism. It's a fun word. So we try to do a lot with a little at Mighty Kingdom. Everyone's spread pretty thin. So we take the attitude that each game we release brings us closer to that step of getting closer to the thing we're looking for. For a long time, we were purely a service company. This is a little backstory. And this allowed us to hire people and keep the lights on. And in the early days of Mighty Kingdom, Phil here set the team goal of making 10 games in 10, was it 10 months? Yeah, which is like standard Phil craziness. There was no quality or revenue targets. It was just games shipped. And that taught us a lot about how hard it is to ship a game, how to use a bunch of different tools to your advantage instead of writing tools. But it also started a shift to us thinking of ourselves as a games company, right? With a goal to make more games using the fee-for-service model at the time, as opposed to being an app developer, because we were doing sort of enterprise apps and stuff as well. So our goals started to really solidify then as a company, like Phil talked earlier about needing to have like clear goals so that you can set up where you want to take the company. And that was where that started to happen. But as you can see, and as you'll see in a second, they've shifted again. And that's that other thing that Phil talked about, which is like set goals, but be fine with them changing if you want to change them. If you think of a better goal. I don't know, like Disney though. It's going to be a tough one to top. So since then, we've shipped so many games. And Kitty Keeper is a more recent example. Like we ship an update for Kitty Keeper every 3 or 4 weeks. I think Shopkins was very similar. I think even with Wildlife, just in soft launch, it's had like 3 updates in a week just to test what's going on.
Yeah, I think like one of the core tenet here is like you're not going to get it right first time, either when you're looking at your company and your company strategy, or even your product strategy. So you need to be taking small steps rather than trying to take giant leaps, because if you leap in the wrong direction, it's awfully hard to leap back. But I'm stretching that metaphor very thin.
I love it.
Or if you're taking smaller steps, you can keep course correcting and making sure you're going in the right direction.
Yeah. which has happened on Kitty Keeper, which is my next note. So, you know, in hindsight, I think we probably overinvested on endless content for Kitty Keeper too early, but because we assumed that people would love playing with the cats on furniture, which when users first come into the game, they really do love that. But the more engaged user that sticks around for a long time, they become less about that and more about other parts of the game, namely loot drops. Everybody loves to gamble. So yeah, shipping, this is a great example, like shipping early and shipping often, it just lets you find this stuff out super fast, and it allows you to adjust course if you need to. And, you know, nuclear option, it allows you to just can the game if you were wrong about with your forecasting and all that jazz. So we're about failing fast, which is something that Phil talks about a lot. It's kind of stressful sometimes. So you need to move fast, right? But that means, and that means taking small steps quickly. If you're taking big steps, sorry, yeah. By doing just one thing, this is your note and I'm confused by it, but I know what it is now. If you're doing just one big thing, like if you're putting all the risk into one thing, you're probably missing opportunities, right? So we try to fail fast. We try to resist the temptation to take those giant steps, even though sort of at the start of any product you kind of have to, unless it's like hyper casual or something. It can be super tempting to take those steps, but you have to look at the market and make sure you can execute it and that the market will respond to it. And like when I say make sure, we do not have Bentleys, so you know, be as sure as you can be. Because the bigger the leap you take at the start, the more downward pressure that obviously puts on the thing you're making that money back. Development costs money, so every time you go, well, we're going to wait longer to find out, it means that the pressure's on that thing to succeed.
Just quickly on failure as well before we move on. I think we say failure, but ultimately failure is just another data point that we have. It's another piece of data that sort of it helps us choose what to do next. So, you know, I don't think of it as being the end. It's just another step along the goal. It's just another part of that incremental. And so, you know, my expectation isn't that we're going to get it right every time, but I think we'll get enough things right that'll reveal what the next thing is that we will do. So failure might not necessarily be the entire product. It might be a particular aspect of it or a pipeline or something else that we tried that didn't work, but that's fine. We found out what not to do. We'll add that to our memory bank and move forward. So you should think about failure in every aspect of what you do. That sounds really negative, but you know.
Jeez, cheer up. All right, so I chucked this one in here actually because it wasn't in there originally, but we found this to be really important in soft launch. And I think both Google and Apple place super importance on this stuff, right? And so do our users. That store presentation, the screenshots, the text, the feature video, feature art, the icon, everything in your metadata, it needs to look amazingly good, right? Because the competition is fierce. So the way we go about doing this now is we do a lot of tests. We use Google. Google has a lot of experiments that you can use to do this. Keywords, Ella has like spent hours trying to understand how Apple's keywords work and how Google's algorithms work when they're searching through your app description and stuff. I'm not sure how close she is, but we seem to do all right. So yeah, and like I said, this is the player's first bite, right, of your game. And we found on Kitty Keeper that this was affecting our installs. Even though we had a super low cost per install, we're around 50 to 60 cents for an install from Facebook, which is low. It's still, we had a lot of page views and people leaving, and I think it was just because the quality of our store art, which we've improved a lot, but we've still got a long way to go as well, I think. So be trying to constantly improve this, because this will save you money in that soft launch period. All right, so licensing.
Do you want me to quick talk about
Yeah,
this?
go on.
So one of the ways that we look to, a strategic decision that we made to manage risk in our company is to look at licensing rather than sort of being purely original IP or purely fee for service. Licensing is sort of like a good middle step where you have a lot of, you have a brand that comes to you that already has a lot of built-in value in terms of an audience. They've created the world, they've created the characters, they've done all that investment. And what you're doing is you're just creating a product within those boundaries. it's a great way of sort of building the technology that will help fuel your growth, but also reducing the risk because it comes with a built-in audience. Should we move on?
Yeah, go on.
Oh man, you've got a new slide in here. What's this one?
This is okay. I'm back, everybody. So yeah, this is the second part of how we manage risk with product, which is like, this is like what this is sort of what I was hinting at before with Phil, having time to think about how we can do these things, right? To make a more efficient company in terms of not making us work harder or faster or whatever, but using what we have at our disposal to be more efficient. So we moved to a licensing model with Shopkins, which has opened up a bunch of new opportunities licensing-wise as well. And it sort of led us to being able to try our hand at original IP. Original IP carries way more risk in terms of marketing, obviously, because you have to launch that brand. Yeah, we'll get to that slide. So just a quick intro, I guess. Whereas licensed product reduces that risk if handled well. No micromanaging, dude. Actually, you know, Giselle thought I was fired because of your last talk. Did you know that?
I said former colleagues. But anyway, people I have worked with previously.
Firing someone during a talk is a power move. Do it.
Don't look at the next slide then.
Just go past that. Just go past that slide. All right. So yeah, original IP is expensive, right, in terms of dev and marketing.
It's missing a scale. That's like money at the vertical scale.
Yeah, I think they probably figured that out. This is going great.
I think, like, just to see opinion, with the original IP, you're carrying two loads of risk there. The development risk, the cost it takes you to develop the product, and the marketing risk. And there's really no way that you can reduce that because the original product, no one knows about it. You have to go out and you have to build that audience. You have to do all that hard work. So there's like, making original products is the future of Mighty Kingdom, but we needed to find a way that we could do that without sort of bankrupting ourselves in the process. Or I think another way, a way that we could make as many original products as we could, because we also know we're not going to get it right first time. It's going to take us a while to find that hit. So we looked at...
Yeah, so, yeah, original IP has that cost, but the benefit of original IP is you don't have another voice in the room, right? Licensed products, there's always licensing approval, stuff like that. So there is a risk sort of on your game, if it's a licensed game, that gets added when you have those guys, that voice in the room. You can't just decide for yourself.
But yeah, if we look at comparing original IP to licensing, the marketing costs are low. They're not zero, and that's not an accurate reflection of the percentage. It's just where I ended up dragging the bar. But the point being that it costs you less to market that product because there's an organic audience that will find that product because they'll be searching for that brand and they'll be searching for things in that space. But also when you are reaching out to do paid advertising, you have the power of the brand to convert with. Like people will look at a game, if it's just a Mafia game, they'll be like, Mafia, there's a few of those. They see a Godfather game, they're like, oh, I like the Godfather. And they're more likely to click and engage with that than they would with just an original product.
Yeah. And you can get, with a licensed product, you can get lowered cost per installs through other means as well. Like Shopkins was a great deal for us because they were a really motivated brand partner and they gave us packaging call out on... Huh?
I thought those claps were for us.
That is for us. They're watching on...
It's a preview.
Yeah. They gave us packaging call outs, right? Which was amazing for us because every kid that got a Shopkins toy was like, install the app. So that really gave us a huge boost on installs.
Kids like doing what they're told.
Yeah, exactly. Kids, well, to a certain age. But if you can find that motivated licensing partner, there's a bunch of different ways. And I think from some of the discussions we've had, I think that's about to change again, where they are understanding that games and apps need to be a bigger part of that sort of brand penetration into the market. So I think they're going to be more willing to do even more of this sort of stuff in terms of packaging call-outs, maybe on TV show call-outs, whatever. So yeah, it's kind of an exciting time for mobile there. Yeah, you want to go on?
Yeah, the other thing that you get when you work with a licensed partner is they bring a lot of material around their brand, like what the world is, what the characters are and stuff like that. It's almost like a template that you can follow when you're developing your own content because they're giving you all the tools that they use to create their to license their brand. So as you're building your own brands, like we're doing, you can use that as a benchmark to say, this is the quality of product we need to have. These are the things we need: a brand Bible, we need turnarounds, we need all these things so that we can then effectively create our own brands.
Yeah. And we definitely we learned a lot, and we use that on Kitty Keeper a lot, and that's why I think that was a big contributor to us being able to find that market that loves cats, which is big. That's a big niche.
Who here loves cats?
Dog people. Yeah, so that's been great for us. So yeah, licensing lowers the cost of advertising, but it doesn't lower the cost of development. But it's essentially the same whether it's original IP or license, but you have that added pressure of someone else, getting all up in your business.
But what it does do, can you see it? Foreshadowing.
Nice.
Is that it allows you to take that product you've developed and reposition it for your own brand. And so all the work that you've put into developing the licensed product can then reduce the development cost of your original product. We're not, obviously you can't just take Shopkins and make shop
Flopkins.
There's obviously some differentiation in the market there, but we use this effectively. Actually, that's the next slide, so I won't go into that too much detail. But it's a really good way of reducing the dev costs and allowing you sort of almost 2 bites at the cherry. You've got a chance to make it with a licensing partner and also with an original product, and you're not significantly increasing your costs.
But with licensing, this is where that forecasting you need to really dig deep on that, because you can't can a licensed product if you feel like it's not going to work halfway through. Generally, once you've signed that deal, you've got to make it and ship that game. Whereas original IP, you can can it whenever you feel like it. All right, so this is the case study bit. This is a little case study.
This is the bit I was foreshadowing before.
Do you want to do this?
Sure thing. So we created a product for Shopkins, a bubble shooter called Shopkins World Vacation. We spent a lot of time, we've got probably like 9 products in the Shopkins space now. It was part of a strategy of dominating the storefront so that all the copycat games got pushed off the search results. But it also allowed us to experiment with different, that's a valid strategy, by the way. It also allowed us to experiment with different gameplay styles and different things. We found there was a cohort of users of Shopkins that would play like late at night and after the kids were in bed. And so we figured that there was this older female audience that was engaging with this brand. And so we created a bubble shooter because that's a very popular game for that demographic. So on the left there, you can see Shopkins World Vacation. And on the right, you can see our original product, which is Wildlife. And a lot of the early iterations of Wildlife just leveraged that bubble shooter almost one-to-one. And that allowed us to get a product up and running very, very quickly and allowed us to focus our attention not on building the engaging game mechanics, but on building the world and the characters. And it also allowed us to sort of make and take some more steps forward. Do you want to add anything before we go?
No, I'm good.
And so on the left, you'll see like Shopkins World Vacation had what we call like a saga map, a very sort of a linear progression, which was very sort of common and popular at the time, and actually very easy and quick to implement compared to our new iteration of that, which is now a narrative engine, similar to sort of homescapes, gardenscapes, where completing the levels gives you stars or energy that you can then use to progress a story around Chloe and Kit the fox as they repair the farm and help these animals and create this wildlife. Oh my God, that's where the name comes from. This wildlife reserve. But so because we had a lot of the investment already made in the, I'm a genius. Because we had a lot of investment already made in the technology of the core game mechanic, we were able to focus our investment on the differentiating factor, which was the narrative engine that we were building. So it's a good example of how a licensing product can lead to an original product.
Yeah, and that's the end of that. But we've got... No, it's good. It's great. I like not doing things.
That's me again.
So yeah.
So yeah, I'll just quickly jump in and say, the risk profile changes as you grow. Like it's a lot easier when you're smaller to be really I was going to say ballsy, but I mean like courageous perhaps is the word, around the risks that you take, because there's only a few of you and you're all kind of all invested in it in the early days. As you grow, the risk changes and it can become more difficult. But what I have found is that scale can reduce risk. At Mighty Kingdom now, we're able to have like 3 teams working on, oh God, how many products? It's like a dozen products. Yeah, don't even go there. So it means that the pressure is off any one product having to carry the load for all the others. You know, it does create its own other issues around sort of managing all the stuff together, but it can actually help reduce the overall risk in your business. So all your eggs aren't just in one basket; they're in many different baskets. But one thing you do need to be aware of and you need to avoid is brinkmanship. Like I say, when you're small, it's easy to just sort of push all in all the time, and sort of if it fails, well, that's fine. We'll just go off and we'll find jobs somewhere else, or we'll do something else. But when there's 50 people and it's all their mortgages and salaries and everything that you've got on the line, it starts to become a more difficult decision to push all in on an idea. So you need to make sure that you're not risking everyone's future just because you have an idea or you want to sort of run a little bit crazy. And so just make sure you're not putting everyone's careers at risk just because of your own silly ideas. That's a note to myself.
I already got fired today, I'm fine.
Give me that, your shirt. And to close it off, I was like, Ella wanted to just sort of hammer this point home that you need to work on your business as hard as you work on your game. You need to make sure that your focus isn't just on making the best product, because one thing about this industry, and most content industries, like which industry benefits from more content, right? Like it's better content that you need, and you need to have all the other things around it that support it and allow it to audience to discover it and to engage with it. You need to be using all the tools that we have to make sure that those players are really engaging with it, that they're rewarding you for the efforts that you've put in, so then you can create more products for them and grow it. But yeah, so I think that's, well, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would add is that we tend to think of every product as a business, right? Like as almost like an individual business within the business. So that's why we do that forecasting. And, you know, if you're starting a business and you're putting together a business plan, you need to do all that, figure all that stuff out. So we think of every product that way. And that doesn't mean we're any less passionate about the product we're making. Like, yes, I'm a dog person, but I've learned to love cats. But I love Kitty Keeper. Like, it's one of my favorite products I've ever worked on, and it's a passion project for me as well. But we're still looking at it as like, we want this to be as successful as possible, which is why we put that effort into understanding it as a business as well.
Yeah.
All right.
I think we're good.
Yeah, we're good. We're done. That's it.
That's it. We're going over to here. Here we go. So there we go. Do we have any questions? Here's one.
When you were talking about finding an audience and finding what they like, do you have any specific trouble, because I know you make a lot of kids games, like finding what kids like and how they play games? Talk about how you do that.
Yeah, so kids are, they're a difficult market. I wouldn't recommend diving straight into the kids space because they're very discerning. It's probably one word.
Yeah.
They're tough. They can spot a fake. They can spot something that's inauthentic a mile away, and they'll just move on very, very quickly. It's not like they're spoiled for choice, or they are spoiled for choice. But
it's still easy to find information about what games are succeeding in that space, though.
And it's easy to find which brands that those kids are engaging with. The difficulty there is that the nature of that space means it's difficult to hit the same level of returns that you'd get from a game focused on adults. So you have to put that into your modeling to make sure that it's not too expensive to find those kids. One of the things we did with Shopkins is we realized that they don't have a lot of money, they don't have credit cards, but they do have a lot of time, and so we invested a lot in building like an ad infrastructure that could support that product and showing relevant content and making sure the parents had the tools and stuff like that. So we were able to overcome the difficulties of that market. There's a lot of action happening behind you right now.
When you are discovering, like if you're looking to license something of a kids brand, when you're doing that discovery phase, you need to make sure that your partner is okay with running ads in the game. It's definitely a big
I think the God of War talk is in here next, right? Yeah. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, it is. So we get to stay in here. We're already in here.
We're just going to stay up here. We're just going to stay up here. Any other questions? Any other questions about God of War?
All right, thanks a lot, guys. It was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.